You clicked this video because you noticed that one side of your chest is smaller than the other. I personally dealt with this for years, along with debilitating shoulder pain, which made my body look a little funky, and it left my training just stuck. Now, I'll tell you, I tried everything to solve this across 5+ years. Scap retraction drills, eyes, Y's, and T's, Bosu ball push-ups, a ridiculous amount of unilateral presses, bands, machine work, anything I could do to wake up that smaller pec. And unfortunately, none of it helped. If anything, it made things a lot worse. And I continued to obsess and spiral year after year. Now, a lot of people will tell you that the cause is due to weak versus tight muscles, poor posture, a poor push to pull ratio, and some even go as far as blaming your organ asymmetries or patterns that you're potentially stuck in. And while some of that, yeah, it can be a bit true, in my experience, the answer is just way more simple than you're being told. I'm not saying these reasons or methods are bad. They just skip the most simple yet critical step, which is checking if your shoulder can even move through the range you're trying to load. And in 99% of the cases of uneven pecs, including my own, the pec that's smaller is typically attached to the shoulder that can't extend properly. And if your shoulder can't extend well, your pec can't stretch eccentrically and load. And we all know that the eccentric loading of the muscle is the most important part when it comes to building muscle. It doesn't really matter how many single arm dumbbell presses you do. If you don't have the mobility, you're not going to be able to load that muscle properly. And unfortunately, what ends up happening instead is you compensate. Your shoulder hikes up, working the upper trap. You push your elbow out wide, putting more stress through that joint. Or you rotate your rib cage entirely in the direction of the limited shoulder. Think about people who bench and the bar is tilted whenever they're pressing up or coming down. And what's wild is after 5+ years of seeing physical therapists, chiros, posture specialists, no one ever tested shoulder extension on me. It seriously was maddening. But once I saw how limited that shoulder extension mobility was on me, and then I improved it, seriously, like everything changed. My pecs balanced out within 4 to 8 weeks of just simple lifting that I was already doing, bench pressing, machine press. And that was simply just because I could load the shoulder extension, load the muscle through a full range of motion without compensating. And that's what I'm gonna show you today, is a simple 3-step process that I wish someone had shown me years ago. We're gonna test your mobility to see what is limited on that side with the smaller pec, mobilize it with some corrective exercises, and then load it up and give you actual exercises in a progression model that you can use in the gym. Step 1, we're going to test your shoulder extension and look at how you're moving, especially if you're compensating. And as a fun fact, not many people know how to actually spot compensations when they test their mobility. Now, many people suggest testing shoulder internal rotation for this if they test at all. But that approach never really made sense to me. Like, who's actually pressing with their shoulders at 90 degrees, elbows all flared out? And even after improving my shoulder IR, I still dealt with this issue. My pec still wasn't growing the same way, though it did help in improving my shoulder pain and discomfort. It wasn't until I brought my arm closer to the body and began to simulate shoulder extension and internal rotation under pressing mechanics that I actually saw some progress. That said, we need to watch for a couple of compensations when we're testing shoulder extension. The first one is excessive shoulder rounding. Think when you perform this test, you want to turn your thumb backwards, reach behind you, and if your shoulder rounds so far that you cannot see your sternum or your chest muscles, then hey, you're probably limited in something and you want to stop the test there. The second compensation is leaning forward. You're trying to make up for a lack of mobility by hunching or going into a kyphosis of sorts. Third is elbow bending. When you reach your thumb backwards and your elbow kicks out to the side and bends, that means the pecs are staying shortened. They're not actually lengthening. And lastly is our shoulder hiking. And that's where your trap takes over the shoulder movement and the shoulder moves up and over the actual extension that your shoulder should be providing. And of course, if you can't get to 45 degrees minimum of shoulder extension, you've got some work to do. Once we know if we're compensating or we can even get to 45 degrees, we'll then address this by fitting exercises to your current mobility before compensations start to take over. This is so that we stop feeding into the same dysfunctional patterns with every single rep that you're doing in the gym and actually improve and maximize the mobility of true shoulder extension. Now in step 2, we're going to mobilize. Now that we know if your shoulder is limited or not and how you might be compensating, let's give you some drills that begin to open up the pec musculature and improve how your shoulder internally rotates and extends. The first exercise we'll utilize is a foam roller lat smash. This is a great exercise for loosening up the shoulder musculature and gaining some initial mobility of shoulder extension and internal rotation. We're going to be using a foam roller and either a dumbbell or a kettlebell, something heavy to hold in the opposite hand. You're then going to set up with your knees at about 90 degrees as you lie on your side and place this foam roller underneath where would be about the nipple line or right underneath the armpit area. You don't want to be too high to the point where your shoulder is shrugging up, but just below it. Once you're then stacked in this position, you're going to take a kettlebell or a dumbbell and reach it up to the ceiling. Make sure you keep your eyes up on the weight as you do this, but if it causes excessive strain on your neck, then just look straight forward. While you have the weight, reach it up to the ceiling as high as you possibly can. What this is going to do, it's going to add extra weight to your body so that way you put more weight into that serratus and lat area to release those muscles. While you have the weight reached up to the ceiling, I then want you to go into external and internal rotation with the arm. So as your palm opens up toward your ear, that's external rotation, you're going to breathe in through the nose. As you then face your palm down toward your hip, you're going to exhale as your arm goes into internal rotation. One last piece of advice, if you're not feeling a lot of pressure through your lat, you may want to make sure that your side isn't dipping down to the floor too much. Here you can see my left side is lifted up off the floor and you can see underneath it. A lot of times people will get set up and their obliques are touching the floor and they're not feeling that pressure on the lat to release the muscle. So you may have to do a semi side plank in this position to put all that weight and pressure through the lat. You're then going to complete this for 2 rounds on each side for a total of 8 to 10 reps, and that includes rotating in both directions. The second exercise we'll utilize is a quadruped breathing. This will be important for solidifying the mobility we got from the first exercise and starting to build a little bit of coordination and control by simply kind of loading in an isometric type positioning. And lastly, it will be improving the ability to breathe into the rib cage, creating expansion or sort of a stretch from the inside out all around the chest, shoulder, and shoulder blade. So you're going to set up in all fours. You can use a foam roller, a yoga block, some sort of ball in between the knees if you would like, as this can add a nice bit of adduction or inner thigh activation. Once you're in this position, make sure you got your knees directly underneath the hips, the elbows directly underneath the shoulders, and then you want to go into a slight bit of protraction at the shoulders. You can either have your palms down on the floor or facing up toward the ceiling. I personally like to do hands down, and that is the goal for this exercise. But if you're getting a ton of upper trap tension, so feeling your neck working a ton, I definitely recommend turning your palms up to the ceiling or supinating, and that should help you out. Once you're in this position, all you're gonna do is exhale everything out, empty the tank, squeeze the foam roller between the knees slightly, hold your breath for 3 to 5 seconds, and then slow, gentle inhale, holding any abdominal tension you might have gained. No, you're not flexing or crunching your abs. You're simply just getting expansion through the entire rib cage. Things to watch out for in this position are really rounding your upper back or shrugging your shoulders up toward your ears. If you find yourself doing that, take a deep breath and relax a little bit. Think pull your shoulders up toward your ears and then pull them down toward the hips. and then protract. And 9 times out of 10, that'll help you from shrugging the shoulders and feeling those upper traps. You'll then complete this for 2 sets of 3 to 5 full breaths. And if you're having trouble getting this breathing down, please check out this video up in the top right corner, as it might help you out. The last corrective exercise I recommend using is a dead hang variation. Now, everyone has done some sort of dead hang, but this one is different in that we actually upgrade the setup simply by putting your feet out in front of you and creating a bit more of a stable, relaxed position. Many people do this exercise and they're way too extended through the low back, and the spine actually steals some of the mobility that the shoulders can gain. So you can set this up with a pull-up bar, a Smith machine. There's so many options. Just grab something that is just outside of shoulder width up overhead, and then where you can set up your feet directly in front of you, creating a 90-degree or so angle at the hips and the knees. And that way you can kind of drag yourself a little bit forward, get those hips in front of the shoulders. That's really going to decompress the spine, stretch the lats, stretch the pecs. And then once we're set up here, we're simply just going to breathe into our rib cage, full exhalation like we learned in the second exercise. Hold that tension in the abdominals and then inhale and breathe up into the rib cage. You should feel a huge expansion all around your shoulders. And it's going to feel like you're kind of peeling meat off the bone as you do this exercise. If you get that sensation, then hey, you're probably doing this right, but just know that this is intense. I recommend doing this for 2 sets of 3 to 5 deep breaths. Now, after doing 1 to all 3 of these movements, be sure you retest your shoulder extension. You need to know if this is actually helping or not. I never guarantee that these videos will help you. I'm more trying to teach you how to help yourself with some additional guidance of things that I found that work. But that said, your tests and your mobility will guide you. I don't care what the intervention is, just get the change and load it, which is a perfect segue into loading the joint. So in step 3, we're giving you the simple progression model, one that meets your current mobility and gradually builds toward full range pressing, especially that fun bilateral bench pressing. First, you're going to start with an alternating floor press. This movement is going to limit how much you can extend the elbow, which can help mitigate or reduce that risk of compensation. A machine chest press, specifically a plate-loaded one, is also fantastic for this here. And just bring that elbow to the rib cage. Don't go farther back unless you have that range of motion. It's also important to watch for the lower back arching, which often sneaks in as a way to fake shoulder mobility. The second movement is a progression to deeper ranges of motion. We're going to use a half kneeling cable press. This movement locks in your hips and spine, forcing your pec and your shoulder to do the work while you relearn clean movement. This is a great exercise as an accessory later in your, say, push days or whatever days you're trying to target your chest muscles. This movement can be interchanged with the floor press, but I find that the loading potential for this one is a lot lower, whereas the floor press is a lot higher. You can go much, much heavier on that. But this one is definitely for maximizing the mobility while still building some strength and some coordination. And then in step 3, we're going to return to bilateral pressing. Now, we don't want to just jump straight into momentum-based huge arch pressing here, but you actually want to utilize things like a Larson press or a pin bench press. And you may even want to decrease the range of motion, not fully tapping your chest just yet, and starting to build into it over time. That said, the most important part of this is a pause in the whole of the movement. So using safeties when you bench press or pausing on your chest is extremely helpful in taking the tension out of the pecs and then relearning how to use both of them to initiate the movement and get that weight off your chest and press symmetrically. And then taking out the momentum mitigates against any of those compensations that can kick in. At this stage, you may also want to consider reintroducing some arching and scapular retractions, especially if you're getting back to heavy bench press. Now, these 3 steps are dependent on you and your situation. You may want to add 20 pounds or so, or just general strength to step 1 before you then progress to step 2. In my personal experience, I actually used all 3 movements at the same time, but used my bench press and my alternating floor press as some of my primary and secondary movements, And then I use the cable press as more of an accessory later throughout the week in a full body training plan. And if you're wanting to know how this actually looks and you're dealing with more than just uneven pecs, your posture's off, your mobility sucks, and your training always feels like it's one step forward, two steps back, then I suggest checking out my Broken Obese protocol. It uses the same 3-step process: test, mobilize, and load, and it applies it to your entire body. You can grab the full PDF program and the ebook on my website, or if you want to just do the program itself for a quarter of the price, it's available inside the WallFit app with 7 other programs that I'm constantly updating in an exercise library as well. Links will be down in the description.